So today, let's talk about the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4070 Ti Super. The name itself is pretty long, so that's a good start. But it has potentially a new GPU die with some models coming out, the AD102. What does this mean? That's the same AD102 that's used in the 4090, right? Is this a new 4070 Ti Super? Does it have more performance? Is the price any different? No, not really. NVIDIA is just using this particular die. Who knows exactly for what reason? Maybe they have extra. Remember, the 4070 Ti Super is based on the AD103, which obviously is not exactly like the AD102. That one actually has been in demand a good amount because the 4090 has been in demand, not only from gamers, but because of AI, and people have been using it for like machine learning, especially in China, where it was actually banned because it's a little bit too powerful. So we don't know the exact reason, but let's talk about the 4070 Ti Super at $799, which is the MSRP, and obviously you'll have some variance in prices depending on the third-party GPU that it may be. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. Is this a GPU that's worth buying? And does any of the new AD102 based GPUs make a difference? Well, not really. Most likely they're going to perform right about the same as any other 4070 Ti Super. It's going to have the 16 gigabytes of VRAM, no difference. Now, potentially thermals could be better because remember, AD102 is a larger die, so possibly that could affect the thermals. Possibly it also affects some wattage. I did see reports that instead of like a 285 watt TDP, the new GPU maybe pulls like 295, so like a 10 watt difference. Not insignificant, but also not a very, large number. So we can kind of speculate that like when you're gaming, you're not really going to notice a difference. The bigger question is, should you get a 4070 Ti Super? Period. Now, when the 4070 Ti first came out, I was one of the ones that was possibly the harshest on it. First, at $799, they originally branded it as 4080 12 gigabyte, which was going to be, I think, $899. So they saw sort of the uproar from gamers and consumers, and then they changed the price to $799, and they also changed the name. It wasn't a 4080 12 gigabyte, which was going to be sold alongside a 4080 16 gigabyte. It was now a 4070 Ti. Now, in my opinion, this is the biggest limitation with the GPU. If you're talking about pure rasterization for 1440p, yes, it was a good GPU in those cases, but only 12 gigabytes of VRAM, and the memory bus, 192-bit, was just way too narrow. And let's translate that into something easy to understand. That means that at 4K resolutions, especially if you're doing high textures and like ray tracing, you may get some choppy performance. I remember playing some games like Hogwarts Legacy, where even though the 4070 Ti was supposed to perform similarly to like a 3090, the 3090 would be smoother simply because it has 24 gigabytes of VRAM and a much more robust memory bus width. Compare that to the 4070 Ti with only 12 gigabytes, and when you're pushing like 4K and you're pushing resolutions, that are going to be more demanding, maybe even ultra wide, and you pump up ray tracing and high textures, you could certainly notice a difference. And then it looks like I was right, because the first thing NVIDIA did when they updated the 4070 Ti Super was add 4 more gigabytes of VRAM, and the memory bus width is also better now at 256-bit compared to 192-bit. So now the 4070 Ti Super with 16 gigabytes of VRAM, 256-bit, now it truly is more of a 4080 than ever before. If you, first of all, compare this GPU to the 4070 Ti, the original one, now I think it certainly is a much superior GPU. So let's break the question down. Would you buy a 4070 Ti Super or a 4070 Ti 12 gigabyte, the original one? Obviously, almost any chance you can, if budget allows, go for the 4070 Ti Super. They still sell the regular 4070 Ti alongside it in some retailers, so this is a valid question. You certainly have to be careful. Now, it's going to come down to price. 4070 Ti Super, MSRP $799. Some models are like $850. Some may even go up until $900 if it's like an Asus Strix or something like that. Sometimes you can see a sale under $700. And then the 4070 Ti, obviously, aside from the used market where you may be able to get one for like the $500 to $600 range, they're mostly somewhere in that $600 range, maybe $100 to $150 less than the 4070 Ti Super. Now, if your budget allows, I think it's definitely a good idea to go for that GPU. When you're comparing 4070 Ti versus the new 16 gigabyte model. Now, things get a little bit murky when you add in the two other super GPUs. I covered the 4080 Super yesterday, and basically what I said was that the 4080 Super at $999, sometimes on sale for $949, may be the better GPU if you can stretch another $100 or $150 to get compared to the 4070 Ti Super. Even though they both have the same amount of VRAM, the 4080 in rasterization, and it's just going to be a better overall GPU. Even though there's not that big of a difference from a 4080 to a 4080 Super, that GPU basically got refreshed to get a $200 price drop, which is something. It's certainly what gamers wanted. You may also be able to find a cheaper, regular original 4080 in the used market for close to the price of a 4070 Ti Super. And then obviously you still get a better GPU with the 4080. It's going to be a little bit closer. It still performs better overall. Same 16 gigabytes of VRAM. Obviously, 4070 Super is where it gets pretty interesting. Now, the 4070 Super was one of the super GPUs that got maybe the biggest performance gain in terms of rasterization. It stayed roughly the same 12 gigabytes of VRAM, but it performs better than the original 4070, and that means it comes closer to the original 4070 Ti. I even tested them side by side, and they were pretty similar. The 4070 Ti still pulls away in some cases, but they're a lot closer, and obviously they have the same 12 gigabytes of VRAM. What is different, however, is that you can get a 4070 Super for a lot cheaper than a 4070 Ti. Some of the new models are under $599, which is the MSRP. I've seen them on sale for like $580, maybe even a little bit lower. So that's a sizable difference from the 4070 Ti Super. Now, the 4070 Ti Super didn't have rasterization performance that was really much bigger than the original 4070 Ti. The main selling point here really was in the extra 4 gigabytes of VRAM. When those scenarios with VRAM become important, then the 4070 Ti will obviously pull away. So in terms of future proofing, it's certainly going to be there, but you're going to have to spend, at least $200 more than a 4070 Super. So that makes it a little bit of an awkward GPU, especially this late into the cycle. Like yesterday, my conclusion was you either go for the 4080 Super and you get all that performance, or you kind of dial it down a little bit and make do with a 4070 Super, which is going to give you most of the performance aside from those little VRAM differences. If you're playing at a higher resolution, I know you may in the near future, if you want to try some of the 4K monitors or even ultra wide, if you like turning on ray tracing, if you're the type of gamer that plays a lot of like single player, first person perspective type games, something that you're not necessarily just looking for performance, you're also looking for visuals and eye candy, maybe you should consider the GPU with more VRAM, because VRAM is going to be used more and more as we go into the future. Even with technologies like DLSS 3 and frame generation to help you control those frames, AMD's FSR, all those technologies are great, but you're still going to need VRAM for ray tracing, high textures, high resolution. So you have to ask yourself the question, what type of gamer are you? If you're more competitive, you may not really worry about such things, and you could just, maybe play on high settings without ray tracing, and you should be okay with like a 4070 or a 12 gigabyte GPU or 4070 Super. But if you want those, eye candy specific items, and you don't want to necessarily spring for the very expensive 4090, I think the 4080 Super kind of works its way in there a little bit better, since the price difference isn't massive when you consider sales compared to the 4070 Ti Super. So the 4070 Ti Super, just like the original 4070 Ti, remains in a little bit of a weird space, even though a lot of people originally skipped the 4080 and they would either buy a 4070 Ti or a 4090, from what I heard you guys say, from what I read around. And that makes a lot of sense because the 4080 was $1,200, and you either just get a bigger budget and you go for the expensive 4090, or if you don't want to spend that much, which is fine, not everybody wants to spend that much, it's a lot of diminishing returns, and you don't want to get a 4080, you get the 4070 Ti, which was basically the best available option there if you don't count AMD's 7900 XT and XTX, which often can compete in a similar price range. That was the option people had. Now with the 4070 Ti Super, it certainly is a more capable GPU with 16 gigabytes of VRAM, but you do have the 4080 Super now closer in price and the 4070 Super closer in performance, aside from the 4 gigabytes of VRAM. If your budget really kind of focuses right near where the 4070 Ti Super is, and if you can get some sales on it under $800, then it may make some sense. It certainly can make some sense. It's not going to perform much worse than a 4080 Super. It has the same amount of VRAM, and you will get a little performance bump compared to a 4070 Super, along with more VRAM. I think it's certainly a better buy than the original 4070 Ti was, but it's not 100% slam dunk, especially considering that RTX 50 series likely will be announced sometime at the end of this year, and maybe between this year and early next year we may start seeing some new models which may start to tank the price of the existing GPUs. And the more expensive a GPU is, like a 4090, 4080, 4070 Ti Super, you're going to get more of that depreciation compared to like a 4070 Super. That's why I still feel the 4070 Super is probably the best sweet spot for NVIDIA in terms of the price to performance, considering the stage that we're at now. 4070 Ti Super is certainly now at least a GPU that's respectable. The price isn't as bad as it used to be with some of the other GPUs, like the more expensive original 4080. It's not ideal. I wish it was maybe $599 and the 4070 Super was like $399 or $499, but we're obviously not going to get those prices. This is probably the best NVIDIA is going to do for the consumers in the near time. So it's basically what we're left with. All right, guys, so let me know what you think down below. Is the new AD102 anything that swings your direction towards the 4070 Ti Super? Or do you think it's a GPU that's still one to avoid? I want to know what your opinion is. Let me know, and I'll see you guys on the next video.